What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's do a little thing we like to call the Middlekauff Mailbag. At John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your question answered here on the show. Quick question for you. As someone who knows the Shanahan coaching tree, what's your take on Seattle hiring Kubiak as their new OC? It feels like a move that could bring some of the Shanahan-style influence to Seattle, which is intriguing. Do you think Kubiak has what it takes to elevate Seattle's offense, given the talent they're going to have on their roster? Also, would you ever consider coming up with a name for like your fans of the pod? Like, I think Jim Rome used to call it "You're in the Jungle" or "Stoolies" or something. I mean, I'm not great at brand names, at coming up with them. So you got any ideas? Hit me up. I would say Kubiak. You know, the Shanahan tree. He's of the Mike Shanahan tree because his father Gary was like Mike Shanahan's first real protege, right? Played for him as a quarterback, as a backup, then immediately transitioned as his quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. He's got multiple sons. Klint, I think, played football at Colorado State, but he was a safety, not an offensive player. His coaching style, he's transitioned to be a offensive guy because, you know, what he knows, I'm sure, growing up from his dad. I would say that Mike McDonald aspires to do what they did in Baltimore of running the ball. And I think that was a knock on Ryan Grubb, who they fired, who I haven't seen if he's already back at Alabama, but that's where most people thought he would go, is run the football. And Kubiak, no coordinator in the NFL started hotter than Kubiak because this year, through 2 games with New Orleans, it looked like they were the greatest show on turf. And then they got a million injuries and it fell apart. But he's going to run the ball. I had a buddy that was on that staff with him in New Orleans, and he said, this guy loves running the ball. So get ready for that. Now that almost all the coaching positions have filled, would love to hear your opinion. What grade would you give each hire? You got to give the Bears an A because that's who they wanted. That's who all their fans wanted. The number one coach on the market. They had to get him. Jags, that thing seems like a shit show. I know he's had a good year in Tampa, but I'm giving that thing a C. It's like you interviewed him and then you fired Balky and then you had to give him 12, $13 million. He's kind of a weird dude. I got that thing red flagged. Jets, I'd go A minus. B plus. I really like Aaron Glenn. I just like, did he have a lot? Yeah, I guess New Orleans probably wanted him. A minus A. I think it's harder. The difference, like why I'd give the Bears an A and Aaron Glenn, I view them both as really good candidates. It's harder. Ben Johnson's going to have an immediate impact. Why he calls the plays for Caleb Williams, and he's going to do nothing on defense because that's going to be Dennis Allen's baby. It's very easy to see the hierarchy there. He's going to call plays. He's going to try to resurrect the offense, and Dennis Allen, who's a good defensive coordinator, it's just easy to see how that operates. Sometimes when you become the CEO head coach, even though Aaron Glenn is, you watch his personality, he's set up for that, right? To be like a Harbaugh brother or a Tomlin, he's going to be fine. But it's like, well, who are your coordinators? Who's calling the plays? Who's your quarterback? It's just more challenging that way. Raiders, I think you'd have to give a pretty good grade because, you just get a real coach. Patriots, A. Cowboys, I'll give a B minus. I think everyone's giving the Cowboys an F. Like you can give Jerry an F and their process an F, but I don't know if Brian Schottenheimer is going to be that much different than Mike McCarthy, to be honest with you. I've been watching the pod for a long time, but haven't asked a mailbag question. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Bengals. Firing Anarumo felt like the move to divert the blame from Zac Taylor, who's been disappointing from a game management and offensive creativity standpoint. How long do you think he lasts? I know they're cheap, similar to the Chargers pre-Harbaugh. But the Chargers were in a similar situation with Herbert and Staley, and just last season they made a change. Did he buy himself more time because of the success early in Burrow's career? Thanks for reading my question. Major difference between him and old Brandon, which I hope Robert Saleh tosses out of the building in San Francisco sooner or later. Zac Taylor does call the offensive plays. So, like your most prized possession, Joe, and your second, Jamar Chase, the offense is kind of his thing. Now, you can say he's an overrated offensive play caller, and I think really nitpicking sometimes his play calling in a situational standpoint can be a little weird. It's like pass, 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 pass. But like ultimately, he does impact the quarterback. I do think he is, hot. We use that term, I think, a little too loosely. Everyone just throws it out like he's on the hot seat. I think if Zach Taylor, they're not in the playoffs, he will not be the coach of the Bengals next year. There any chance that Schottenheimer works? I mean, I assume there is, however small it is, but how much credit would Jerry get even at that point? It was a best a blind guess. 100% there's a chance it works. Like, why can't Brian Schottenheimer just be solid? And if they do a good job, they've drafted well over the years, and his team stays healthy, they couldn't compete to make the wild card next year. I 100% believe that that's a possibility. He is not like some Urban Meyer that had no clue how to operate in the NFL. Doesn't seem like he's completely over his head like some of these guys like Joe Judge or Patricia or Tom Sula. People love that I keep dropping Tom Sula. I was just there for the Tom Sula experience. And if you were there for the Tom Sula experience, it's something you will never, ever forget. He once farted in a press conference. If you don't believe me, YouTube it. And it was awesome. It was glorious. I think Balky also farted in a press conference like in the last year, which is perfect because they were together when they were with the 49ers. Balky hired him. But I just don't think he's going to be that bad. Now, I think if they just keep doing what they're doing, maybe a 10-win season and maybe a 7-win season, people are just going to freak out and blame Jerry. Now, if it does work and he's just good, let's just say he's a good head coach, and we'll see who his defensive coordinator. Oh, they hired Eberflus, who's good defensive coordinator, right? It's like some of these guys, you just saw this cycle, right? Eberflus fired, Saleh fired, Dennis Allen fired. All those guys, immediate hires as defensive coordinators, good defensive coordinators, no brainer hires. Like all of them making a lot of money as defensive coordinators. They're just not good head coaches. So it's like you get a defensive coordinator. Now, Jerry Love, like, why did he rehire Eberflus? Or why did he hire Eberflus or Schottenheimer? Like, Eberflus had worked there. So it's like they knew him. Jerry loves doing that shit, like guys he knows. And I'm with you. If they win, let's say they won a Super Bowl. Let's just say in some world, the Cowboys in 2 years win the Super Bowl. Jerry, you're right. Like, Jerry, if you were really believed what you were selling yesterday at the press conference, you would not have released the news that you hired this guy Friday night at 9 o'clock Dallas time. And you can't tell me that you're just, well, is it going to be the fan reaction? No, you knew everyone would shit on the move. And like, I just, I'm with you. I don't think Jerry gets that much credit, even though he would take it all, literally all of it, over Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer could have an undefeated season. The Cowboys could win every game and win the Super Bowl. Dak could win the MVP. Jerry would take the credit. I do kind of like Jerry. I just find him entertaining. My question for the mailbag is this. Do you feel like Lamar Jackson would have a better chance at winning a Super Bowl with another team? I know the Ravens are a stable organization, but I can't help but wonder if he played for the 49ers, he'd have a ring. Your thoughts? The 49ers have been to Super Bowl twice, and they've played the Chiefs, and they lost both games. Lamar Jackson hosted the NFC Championship team, or AFC Championship last year. A team that the 49ers were in the Super Bowl. The Ravens played the Niners on Christmas in 2023 and beat the brakes off them. Kicked their ass. I forget the final score, but the final score was not as close to the actual game because the Niners got some garbage points. Let me just look up the score. 33-19. And the 49ers scored in the fourth quarter 7 points. So it was 33 to 12 going into the fourth quarter. He had the number one seed, the best defense in the league. So no, the Ravens is as good of a spot as you can have. He has a great defense. He has Derrick Henry now, Mark Andrews, who usually can catch. I've been watching closely on how the ratings for the NBA are at a low point, but the NFL are at an all-time high. I was curious if you recall a time when the NFL seemed to have a popularity issue. I don't think it would ever be low when you consider the Super Bowl and the urgency of each game. But I started following football closely in 07, 08, but wondered how the NFL's popularity looked like in the 2000s when we got Ravens, Giants, Super Bowl, and Bucks, Raiders. I would say the NFL became much more popular over time in the internet era. And I think a huge reason for that was the dominance of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Those two guys were Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, what they meant to the NBA. And then Tom Brady kept parlaying that into one of this 20-year dynasty with a team that more people hated than liked, and that just drew everyone's emotion. So I think the explosion of those two guys and then handing it off to, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson became a superstar for a couple years, and then obviously the crew of guys we have now. So I think the NFL's always been driven by its star quarterbacks, at least in my lifetime. I was born into Elway, Montana, Marino through Steve Aikman, or I just go Steve Aikman, Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Brett Favre, kind of that crew into Brady and Manning and Roethlisberger. I mean, there's a ton of guys, right? But Drew Brees, you're only as strong as your quarterbacks. And I think the NFL, we talked about it earlier on the pod that the urgency, it's not just the urgency, it's easy to consume. It's once a week. Like I feel very lucky that I ended up working in football because when I was early on in college, I would have worked in any of these sports, right? If they would have had me. I liked football the most, but if I could have got into baseball, I don't know if I would have lasted because I would have got bored. But I did my career, if someone would have hired me on a professional baseball team, I would have done that. And I think I feel very fortunate that I don't have to watch a baseball game every night. Hell, I did this in radio, watch a basketball game every night. I can't even imagine doing that, right? And when you do local radio, you don't really have a choice. Like I don't watch any of those sports. One, I don't even feel like they matter, definitely to me, and obviously to the consumer here in football. It's like it's a grind during the season, but it's Monday night, it's Sunday night, it's Thursday night, and that's kind of it. Like we don't, there's no game on Tuesday. There's no game on Wednesday. There's no game on Friday. There's college games and Saturday watch college, but it's just if you're a diehard Bengal fan or a diehard Penn State fan, it's so easy to consume. For 3 hours once a week, the day might change. In the NFL, it could be a Thursday night or it could be a Monday night. In college, I would say 99% of your games are going to be on Saturday, but every once in a while you might get like a Friday night game, not counting the playoffs. And it's just an easy sport to follow. And right or wrong, we've never been more splintered when it comes to our attention. Even though I feel like the content on television has never really been worse. That the show with Tim Riggins, I think I talked about this recently, where he's like, I wouldn't call it quite Cowboys and Indians. It's about I think the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe the mid 1800s, with Brigham Young, and it was like John Wick meets a Western. It was a elite 6 shows. It was a series on Netflix. But I feel for every one of those, there are 90 misses. I actually don't feel the content on these streaming services are that great. And it's pretty rare now. Every once in a while you get like a Game of Thrones, which I didn't really like, but I'm not that into like sci-fi stuff, though I watch because I like violence and sex. So it's like if you tell me you're gonna give me, even if you are gonna have dragons, it's like, yeah, a lot of people die and a lot of nudity. It's like, yeah, I'll watch. But I don't feel like there are that many shows that like every single human's watching, and football is the one I think we all agree on. Now we might not like I try to watch most games, right? I mean, so, as the season goes on, like you don't have to watch Jags Giants, But I got multiple TVs with four boxes and TV and computer screens. But everyone, more than likely, if you're listening to this podcast, has a team. And if you're not watching the red zone, like you watch your team's game. You could be a big baseball fan, like miss a week of baseball, and it just doesn't matter. Like it's pretty hard to miss a game of football. This ain't the little itty bitty tiny bowl. This is the Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hosting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a TD. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get 200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get 200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The crown is yours. I saw an interesting graphic the last 25 NFC and AFC championships. The AFC has obviously been dominated by Manning, Big Ben, and Brady, and now Patty Mahomes. The NFC has been nothing but parity, however, despite having great quarterbacks like Breeze, Rodgers, to a lesser extent Russell Wilson, Eli, and Matt Ryan. Why do you think none of those quarterbacks were able to dominate the NFC in the same way Patty, Tom, and Peyton were able to dominate the AFC? Well, the only one you listed in the NFC who is remotely as good as those other three guys is Aaron Rodgers. And I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers went to 5 championship games, which is pretty good. I think looking back on Aaron Rodgers' career, I think if you played it, Bill Simmons plays this game sometimes. If you just played his career 10 times, you could argue, I guess he could potentially have a worse career. He could never have won a Super Bowl like Dan Marino. But I think 7 out of the 10 times, if we just ran a simulation, Aaron Rodgers makes it to like 3 or 4 Super Bowls. Even if he loses some of them, like he's in more Super Bowls. I think it's pretty crazy looking back at Aaron Rodgers' career that he only made it to 1 Super Bowl. I think it's pretty crazy, right? Like he's dramatically better than Russell Wilson. It's Eli Manning. They just got hot at the right time. For whatever reason, Rodgers would be on these awesome teams, and his teams just wouldn't get hot in the playoffs. And they would just lose these devastating games. Tampa the one year to Brady, a couple times the 49ers. Obviously, the Seattle game that they lost. Was that game in Seattle? So I just think that you could argue that Patrick Mahomes, Peyton Manning was better than Rodgers. And Tom Brady, like Patrick and Brady had Belichick and had Andy Reid. I think if you put Aaron Rodgers with one of those two guys, I think he has more Super Bowls. I mean, shit, Jalen's been to 2. Is going to start more Super Bowls than Aaron Rodgers. Jalen Hurts. Think how crazy that is. Russell Wilson started more Super Bowls than Aaron Rodgers. Eli Manning did. It's pretty insane that he only went to 1. It's pretty crazy. Giants fan here. I don't understand how we just give away 3 players, McKinney, Barkley, and Daniel Jones, and didn't get back one single draft pick. I don't understand their contracts were up. No, I understand their contracts were up, but couldn't they have signed them to a contract and then immediately traded them? We have a tendency to do this, and it pisses me off. Side note, Spags was our defensive coordinator when we won the Super Bowl in '07. One of the few to stop Tom Brady. Dude is a legend. True, he really is. Uh, yeah, man. I mean, the Daniel Jones thing is like whatever. That was just all-time disaster scenario, right? Has career year. I think he threw like what did he throw 15 touchdowns, and he gets the $80 million contract, and that's just obviously an immediate regret. McKinney clearly just didn't vibe with the coaching staff. You know better than me. I mean, I'm sure there have been articles written like they didn't think he fit. I mean, they drafted a safety relatively high right in the draft. The Saquon thing's well documented. In fairness to them, Saquon just for the money doesn't make sense when your offensive line sucks and your offense sucks. I think that's just a win-win. What are your thoughts on the University of Utah? Diehard Utes fan, but frustrated with Cam Rising and head coach Kyle Whittingham. No sense of direction. We were projected to win the Big 12 last season, but we're an embarrassment. Your guys' relationship with Cam Rising has been we all have this friend who's like had this on and off, whether it's like a wife that feels like they've been divorced 5 times, or a girlfriend that somehow they've been dating for 7, 8, 10 years, but it's like, why aren't they married? Do they even like each other? But there's it's a weird relationship. And the Cam Rising thing should have ended a couple years ago. And this year they went all in on him, and he got hurt early. I was actually watching the game when he got shoved, I think, into the bench and hurt his hand, and then you had to go to Zach Wilson's brother. You guys quarterback play is just I don't understand how this team can't just find some just solid quarterbacks. You have an elite defense. You always have good running backs, but your quarterback play, subtract Cam Rising, is just sucks. It feels like it's been that way for a while. I'm not asking for Alex Smith, number one overall pick, but Utah, you'd feel like, yeah, they just got a couple guys that were just drafted back to back times in like the 6th round. That just doesn't happen. Keep up the great work. I wanted to pose this to you for the mailbag. My wife is a school teacher, and I work in compliance for a financial institution. We don't make an abnormal amount of money, and I'd say we're about middle class as middle class comes. That's not a bad thing in my book. I agree. I want to eventually invest some of our money, but I'm not sure where to start. I was wondering if you have any advice or guidance about how to go about this. I don't necessarily need examples of what to invest with, but more so how I judge what a good investment would be. I mean, I feel that I'm not quite comfortable answering this for you. Every investment, I think we all look at money and look at investments much differently because we have different risk tolerances. There are probably some people, if they looked at my stock allocation or what, I guess that's the majority. It's not like I mean, I have a house that I live in, and Maria has another house that we rent out. But I say we now because we're about to get married. I had nothing to do with it. But my risk tolerance for investing in stocks is, I would say, 1 to 10, one being not risky at all, 10 being some people would call you fucking nut job, much closer to 10 than it is one. Just like there are some people that, would be like, yeah, that's the way I like to invest. And then there are other people that, just play it slow and steady in the slow lane. So I think it is so dependent whether you are going to invest $100, 100 grand, or $100 million. It's very dependent on who you are. Obviously, if you have $100 million, there would just be a way. I mean, you're going to take a large portion and just play it safe, right? But when you're talking about like money that you're going to invest that you need either for retirement or potentially to use on a down payment, you need to talk to financial advisors, because this is not something that like I, I don't want to say a gut feel. I mean, I've been messing with the market for probably give or take a decade, but like what I do is not for you. I don't have a financial advisor. I know we got a couple people that listen that are constantly blowing me up to try to get my business. I just enjoy doing it. Now, as I have children, as my risk tolerance, I'm sure potentially changes. Like I'm a risk taker. So I don't know. Obviously, there has to come a line, if your children's tuition to go to college, even though I'd say, hey, college isn't necessary. Uh, I just struggle to give you advice on something that is so personal. It's very, very personal. I would say it's more personal than like, hey, should I buy or rent, right? Should I ask her to marry me? Like I feel comfortable up answering those questions. Like, how should I invest? I think that's really, really up to you. The one advice I would have though, invest money. Invest money, even if it's in the very, very basic stuff, right? Which most people would just call the S&P 500. I think you're crazy. One of my biggest regrets is not starting this right when I left college. Hell, do it in college. I started when I was 30, give or take. I lost years of earning potential, even if it wouldn't have been a lot of money being put in there. The faster you can invest, the quicker I would do it. Big fan, and I enjoy listening to you talk about your experience moving out of California. I recently moved my family from Santa Rosa, California. It's kind of for those of you non-Californians, think Napa, think above San Francisco area. It's beautiful, but it's insanely expensive. Now we can afford to have way more space with way less people, and it's awesome. I agree with you that Nevada and Arizona are booming states and growing economies the way people talked about Oregon and Washington and Texas 20 plus years ago. My question for you is, as much as we love hearing your football takes, do you think you would ever want to talk more about politics, government, or geography type topics? I really enjoy listening to you and Colin talk about the Paradise uh, fires after it happened. If you wanted to go that route, I'd be all ears. I would never say never. I would say right now, I just, sometimes when you talk about politics, it just becomes, it's not even like the polarizing. You talk about football, people get pissed off at things you say. It does for me strike more of like an anger emotion, and it's one of the reasons that when I moved to Arizona, I kept getting so mad at myself for being angry over things that I could not control. So I removed myself from the situation of like, why are you just going to get mad at what is, and this was during 20 and 21 in California. Like, why are you getting so mad at these things that nothing you can do can change any of it? Right. And I remember that feeling. And sometimes, and I enjoy talking politics with my friends. And I enjoy following on the internet and stuff that's going on. But I do think there is more enjoyment talking about sports. Now, I would say one big picture thing is, in this profession, there's more money talking about politics, that's for sure. And for a reason. I mean, there's just more anger. I mean, there's just Maria was involved in a sale of someone that's in the political sphere, and there's NDAs being given out to protect people, and rightfully so because stuff gets out. You just put your family at harm. It's kind of crazy. I'm 40 years old. We've been in this space now for a decade, and we'll just see how life goes. But right now, we'll talk some Tua. Uh, What should the Miami Dolphins do with Tua now that he is under contract? And where does Tyreek Hill go now when he essentially gave up on the team? See, there's that question is the equivalent of like Middlekauff. What should happen to Social Security? It's like it's much easier to give. Like that's a bad question for me because I don't even know where the fuck I couldn't tell you more than a paragraph about Social Security. But when it comes to Tua, like it's an easy question for me to answer. I think you just try to get out of that thing as quickly as possible because if he's your quarterback, you got no chance. The thing with the AFC, man, it is a different animal. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert. I'm not putting Bo Nix in their class, but like him under Sean Payton, like that thing's gonna work. It's just difficult. It really is. The AFC is no joke. I don't know what else to say beside like I just don't take Miami that seriously. I really don't. And no one wants like the Tua stuff with him getting hurt. That's just that last was it this yeah, it was this year, Thursday night, playing the Bills. Was that like week two? Was that week three? When he got hit. That was I would say one of the low moments of the NFL. And just that whole conversation around that. Uh, and even I saw Saban. I saw a clip on Instagram. He went on the Pivot podcast, and Shannon Crowder told a pretty funny story about Saban. But also, like Saban, he was asked like, "Who were your favorite players at Alabama?" And he listed like five guys. Like he didn't list that many, and two of them obviously like Julio Jones. Who are your favorite players to coach? One thing I respect a shitload about Tua, it feels Saban's favorite quarterback that he coached for 17 years in Alabama is Tua. He loved that guy. Love that guy. Love Bryce Young too. And I think Tua's a high level cat. Like I like Tua the guy. He's not really my cup of tea as a player. Weak arm, can't really move, small. A couple more questions. Coach Carroll's press conference. He made lots of mentions of the Raiders ownership group, Wagner, Durbin, Michael Meldon, and of course Brady. What are your thoughts on the organizational shift within the Raiders? I mean, I think those guys are like venture capitalists, like money guys that came in with Tom. I know nothing about any of those individuals. Besides, I'm sure they're really, really rich. I'd say it can only get better because it can't get any worse, right? What do you do when you find yourself in a hole? As John Baxter once told me, special teams coach, drop the shovel. And I think that's where the Raiders like we just need, and I give Mark credit. The Tom Brady thing was his idea. This was not one of those league forced Tom Brady. Like he went out and uh, you know, like he went seeking a guy. And he even said it yesterday in the press conference. Like, I gave it to John Gruden, 10 years, run football. I don't know how to run football. I'm not my dad. I'm not a quote unquote football guy. I love football, but like, I want you to do it. And then Dan Snyder leaked all the emails. That was what someone told me recently that Dan Snyder was behind it, not Roger Goodell. But I don't know if that person was right, but it would make sense. And obviously, Mark still to this day is not happy about that situation. But once Gruden disappears, he's got to find somebody, and he goes with Tom Brady. And now you just got to leave Tom Brady, Spytech, Pete Carroll. Hopefully, they can run the organization. I don't know what those other guys like. We had when I worked for the Eagles, like on draft day, there were I think I think Jeffrey Lurie's added minority owner since. But like when you're a minority owner, you don't really do anything besides you get some seats at a game in a box. You get to come to the draft day, but you don't like talk to Andy Reid what to do, like give influence on when he needs a fire assistance. Like there's one guy. And ultimately that guy is still Mark Davis. So like if he's not happy with like those other guys like only have so much pull on the organizational chart. Like you look at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg runs that bitch. You know, Mark Zuckerberg wants something to happen, it happens. And that's the way these NFL teams work. So even Tom Brady, now Mark is I think an easy owner to deal with because he's like telling these guys like you pick who to hire. Right? I'll get behind it and he'll let them influence, but ultimately if Mark doesn't like something, he is the guy on the piece of paper. We talk about this a lot with GMs and coaches, like who's the decision maker? There's only one decision maker in every team, right? So you can have a million of these like this firm, these three guys, Brady. If Mark Davis wanted to fire Pete Carroll tomorrow, he could. Those guys could not. Big fan. I check your takes often. Who do you think, talent wise, is the best quarterback ever? GOAT, Brady Mahomes. But as a pure passer of the football, I go Marino or Rodgers. What say you? Yeah, I would say I didn't. This has always been just a life philosophy. It's hard for me to argue about like Jack Nicklaus against Tiger Woods. It's like, well, I never watched Jack play. Right? Dan Marino versus Aaron Rodgers. Well, I watched Dan Marino play when he was really old. So it's like when you watch guys in their prime, I feel comfortable talking about you name any player of the last 30 years because I watched them. It's hard for me. Like, what's your take on Mean Joe Green? What did you think about Bill Walton in his prime? I don't know. I mean, I can YouTube it. It's not the same. It's like you turn on television night and you watch Jokic on Denver. You're like, holy shit. This guy's Steph Curry or, Juan Soto. It's like Shohei Ohtani. Remember Shohei Ohtani? How does Shohei Ohtani compare to Mickey Mantle? It's like, I don't know. I never saw Mickey Mantle. Beside, my dad actually went to lunch one time. I think in like the 80s in Vegas with some business people. Like he's a farmer, some other farmers at a casino, and Mickey Mantle was there. And he always gave a story that Mickey Mantle had like five cocktails down before the appetizers. Mickey Mantle could drink. And which, if you were my dad's era, like growing up in the 60s or 70s, Mickey Mantle like fucking god. But I think everyone in the NFL used to say Marino. I would say the guy that I saw the best passer of the football for the last 20, 30 years, Rodgers in his peak was as good as it gets. I heard you the other day said Spags would never be in the Hall of Fame. Who do you think the best defensive coach of all time? Here's my rank in order from 80s till now. I know there's others, but would you agree or disagree? Belichick, Buddy Ryan, Marvin Lewis, Spags, LeBeau, Wade Phillips, Monty Kiffin, Jim Johnson. I would put Shit, I clicked out of that. Damn it. I lost it. My fault. I think I lost your. I found it. Belichick. I think you got to remove Belichick. I think if you do head coaches who are defensive gurus, it's a little harder. If you just look at it when they were defensive coordinators, Marvin Lewis for the Ravens, Belichick for the Giants, Buddy Ryan for the Bears, Spags for this Chiefs team, LeBeau for the Steelers, Monty Kiffin for the Tampa, Jim Johnson for the Eagles. That's a pretty damn good group. Pretty hard to beat that. I would say Belichick confides that he thinks, and again, this is a head coach, but and he became a head coach really, he wasn't a defensive coordinator that long, but Belichick believes that Saban is one of, if not the greatest defensive mind ever. And the way his coverages of like pattern matching, it's like really geeky football stuff, but like the shit he was doing in college with the athletes, I mean, it ain't random they were kicking everyone's ass. Just listen to your take on Belichick and Reed's coaching tree. I do agree with you that Belichick's coaching tree doesn't hold a candle to Andy's, but I was thinking, in the Reed and Mahomes era, other than Nagy, limited success, Trubisky to the playoffs as a feat, but ultimately fired, there hasn't been any coaches or coordinators that have been mentioned in the coaching circles or searches. I am curious what your thoughts are about that. The only one that comes to mind is Bieniemy, and I can't think of anyone else. Huge fan of the pod. I would say, yeah, Nagy. Doug left during the Alex Smith era. He started at Kansas City with Andy, went to the Eagles, won a Super Bowl. Like you said, Nagy made the playoffs twice. Mike Kafka, I think, was an up and coming star, left as a quarterback coach under Nagy and Bieniemy, and went to the Giants a couple years ago with Dayball. I think pretty highly of Mike Kafka. I think one thing that changes the Chiefs dramatically is, a lot of years, if you coach for Nagy or for Andy, think of the guys that got hired. Ron Rivera, defensive guy. Spags, defensive guy. Jim Harbaugh, defense, or John Harbaugh, special teams defense, right? And now Spags. But Spags, like, no one's going to hire him. So, like, his most valuable asset is just not going to get hired, which is kind of crazy, but that's just the truth. So, like, would anyone give Nagy another shot? Uh, I mean, well, how old is Matt Nagy? 45 years old. I think there's a very decent chance Matt Nagy's a coach again. Maybe a little older than that. 46. Question for the mailbag. The narrative all year has been that the NFL refs and or Vegas are rigging it for the Chiefs. I think that narrative really picked up steam last month. I don't know if it's all year, but maybe you're right. I guess there have been some weird games. In that case, why don't all the non-Chiefs fans bet on the Chiefs money line? They're 17-1, not counting the Broncos loss. And Mahomes has won 80% of his games of his career. I saw a stat that 67% of the public bet Buffalo to win the championship game, which implies that the NFL and Sportsbook rig it for Kansas City. Curious to hear your thoughts. I think you have to be very careful. And let's use an example. I see this media do this a lot. Sometimes people on podcasts. There's a lot of conversation out there about, and really that's coming from the comments of a video that was posted. Like, is there a lot of conversation about so and so? Or is it just like if I look in the comments of a post about whatever, you could find the conversation about that? And I think that happens all the time. I could literally find an angle on any story in America. You name the story. Pick a topic. The housing market, the Chiefs, Trump, South Dakota, you name it. And I could type it in and type in an Instagram or Twitter post about that subject and react to the comments and be like, you know what people are saying about the water rights in South Dakota? They believe it's a con job just because two people had mentioned that on 15 responses to a tweet or an Instagram post. So, like, I think when everyone goes, the game, I think that was, it kind of gained steam by a couple people. And then Schefter put out some stats and it just started growing and growing and growing. Now, the reason you don't bet the Chiefs money line, because a lot of their games, they're 7 to 10 point favorites. So it's like you're going to bet $100 or $1,000 to win, I don't know, 30, 40% of your money. It's not rigged. Of course it's not. Like it's just, it's just not. I don't really know what else to say. But I hear you. I think that I, I think one of the easiest things for people to do is now react to the reaction. And if you listen to this pod, you know, we kind of avoid that sometimes. Like, kind of bores me. Like, I don't give a fuck, what the reaction was to the reaction. It's like, and I think a lot of people in this space, it's like, you guys got no shot. It's just not that entertaining. Now, if a story's big enough, and listen, I'm not talking about this Chiefs rig story. Like, that became a legitimate story people are talking about. But I think sometimes it's like, people talk about stories that if you're just online a lot, and let's face it, a lot of people in the media spend a majority of their time online, specifically like on Twitter, that you can think something's a lot bigger than it is. It's like, it's not actually that interesting. And if you just, I always do this test, like walk into a store right now or just walk around a bunch of people. Hell, go to a golf course, go to the driving range and just walk up to some people and they would not even know what you're talking about. Like right now, there was that Benjamin Solak, one of Bill Simmons' little minions. I guess put some tweet out. I don't guess. I mean, I saw the tweet because a bunch of people were talking about it online. That like Josh Allen fucked up on the final play. Should have thrown the wheel route to Khalil Shakir in the flat, even though he was under siege before he could even blink. All these quarterbacks like Ryan Fitzpatrick are calling him like, bro, what are you talking about? He had no time to turn around. And it's like I just think a lot of people would think like that's a really big story. Like if I just did that poll right now, went to the golf course, went to TPC Scottsdale right now, a bunch of dudes are there, I'm sure, playing golf. And I just asked them, like, what's your take on Benjamin Solak saying that Josh Allen screwed up on that final? They'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. So I think we got to be. I tried to be very cognizant of that when we're gonna talk, do a podcast, because that bores me, and if it bores me, then I think it bores you. And if I'm bored, then it's just not gonna be a good show. Okay, I'll end on this. Thoughts on the Texans OC opening? I'm unsure the best candidates are, and I think they need to go with someone proven. Since D'Amico is a defensive guy, I'm skeptical about Doug or Chip Kelly. But if it worked and has potential of being a long tenure, like Spag's situation, this is a critical hire if the Texans plan on doing something special. Is Chip Kelly being discussed as D'Amico's offensive coordinator? I haven't. That's one. Like this is a real story, but I have not seen like a list of. I haven't even seen him as he interviewed anybody. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Obviously he played for those two guys. I don't know if he technically played for Doug, but Doug was on the staff when Andy traded for him. The Chip Kelly thing. I know it works when you got Jeremiah Smith. Uh, you got all those talented wide receiver, the two running backs. I would be very, very hesitant doing that. You think you're beating the Ravens? You think you're beating Sean McDermott? You think you're beating Spags with Chip Kelly's your offensive coordinator in the National Football League? I know he gets to stack the deck at Ohio State, but I would not do that. Doug's a great guy, dynamic play caller. I would say some people would question that at this time being. Again, I like Doug. I don't really know who your options are. Okay, we'll end on one more. If Jalen Hurts and the Eagles win the Super Bowl, can we officially say that we found the Eli Manning to Tom Brady and the Mahomes story? I mean, the comps of the two are so similar. All-time historic quarterback in his prime that wins Super Bowls, bested by a quarterback that wasn't universally recognized as top tier. Yeah, I think it depends. I think part of the Eli story was he made some of the craziest plays in those two Super Bowls. The throw to Manningham down the sideline, obviously the David Tyree. He just made so many big plays in their Super Bowl runs. I guess Jalen definitely this year in that championship game feels like it was harder for Eli to get there. You know what I mean? And Jalen's too, and I'm not trying to take away anything from Jalen. I respect him. That performance the other night was awesome. But Eli to get to the Super Bowl, the one game he had to play Green Bay where everyone like froze their feet off. Then he had to beat the 49ers on the road against the top defense of Vic Fangio in just a bloodbath game in the rain. And I forget who he played in 11 in the championship. I know he played the Cowboys. He played the Packers. I forget who they beat to get there, but that was really impressive. Uh, I would say, yeah. I mean, I listen. You're a Super Bowl winner. That changes your life. Changes your life. There's a lot on the line for the Chiefs in this game in terms of just historical data points, like trying to approach like legendary status. But if they were to lose, it ain't the end of the world, right? They already got three of them things. Right. This would Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts would be Super Bowl champions. And like you said, looking back, like Eli Manning was, I think there'd probably be some similarities there with Jalen. I think it'd be crazy. Like Tom Coughlin, clearly a good coach. Nick Sirianni is a Super Bowl champion. Like we have had some questionable quarterbacks win it over the years. Definitely when, if you're my age, when we were like growing up, like after the John Elway, Troy Aikman, Steve Young era, Brett Favre, it then went, Trent Dilfer won one, Brad Johnson won one. I mean, these guys were NFL players, longtime starters, but not exactly Brady Manning and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, right? But I would say most of the coaches, John Gruden, yeah, Brian Billick, somewhat of an outlier coach, but there's a lot of Bill Belichick's, Andy Reid's, Bruce Arians, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Nick Sirianni is going to be on that list with like Jimmy Johnson, Mike Holmgren, Bill Walsh, George Seifert, Mike Ditka, Joe Gibbs, Bill Parcells, Nick Sirianni. And the Eagles would kind of have two of them, Doug and Nick. Now, Doug's a football guy. Played in the NFL for a long time, backed up Favre, backed up Marino. He's played in the league for a long time. Sirianni, let's face it, before he got the job with the Eagles, most people had never heard of him. There's a lot of people in the NFL who are good that you've never heard of. I think if the Eagles win it, it'd be much crazier that Sirianni is a Super Bowl champ than Jalen. It would also put Howie Roseman in the Hall of Fame. He would be a general manager of two different teams that won Super Bowls with different coaches and different quarterbacks. I didn't do the research, but I just thought about it the other day. The only guy that came to mind was Ozzie Newsome, who was the GM with Billick and Dilfer, and then was the GM with Harbaugh and Flacco. Howie, if he wins, would be the GM with Foles and Doug, and then the GM with Sirianni and Jalen. Maybe I'm missing someone, but I don't know. That'd be pretty nuts. Adios, everybody. Have a great day.